Welcome to the What Bitcoin Did podcast.
Hello there from Portland, Oregon. How are you all? I finally made it here. I'm here a day late because American delayed my flight yesterday, so I had to stay an extra night in Cleveland. But I've got here. I'm finally here in Portland. Wanted to visit for a while. It seems beautiful. But sadly, I'm only going to get one night here due to that delay in that flight. So heading out to San Francisco tomorrow, but looking forward to the meetup we're having tonight and an interview I'm recording tomorrow. Anyway, welcome to the What Bitcoin Did podcast, which is brought to you by the mighty Kraken, the best place to buy and sell Bitcoin. I'm your host, Peter McCormack, and today I've got a bonus show. This was a fireside chat I recorded with Russell Okung at his event, Bitcoin Is in LA. So it's not a long one. It's about 25 minutes long, but I thought you'd all want to hear it. So here it is. And I'm going to do a very quick shout out to all my sponsors first, though. So firstly, Kraken, the best exchange in the world with spot, futures, margin trading, and their OTC desk. They have all your trading needs covered. With security in their DNA, it's the only place that I will trade. So support me at Kraken, which is KRAKEN.com. Also, BlockFi, the future of Bitcoin and financial services. They've got their crypto-backed loans and their crypto interest accounts, which now have no minimum deposits. Find out more at blockfi.com, which is BLOCKFI.com. Dropbit, the best mobile wallet for Bitcoin. Text and tweet Bitcoin to your friends. It is like a Venmo for Bitcoin, and now includes support for Lightning and Betch32 addresses, which is very cool. I'm going to be giving away 10 million sats next week, so keep an eye out for that. Find out more at dropbit.app, which is DROPBIT.app. CIS, the event in LA next week, I'm going to be hosting a couple of chats with. It's on the 15th and 16th, and they have launched a campaign to give everyone free tickets to the conference. Find out more at cis.la/WBD. And Wire, who offer your users an easy and fast way to purchase Bitcoin. They take care of the heavy lifting in terms of compliance, payments, and liquidity. Find out more, reach out to Wire or create a developer account at sendwire.com, which is SENDWYRE.com. Okay, so on today's show, we have a fireside chat I held with Russell Okung while out at Bitcoin Is, the event he put on in September in LA. And having someone as high profile as Russell becoming a spokesperson and a leader for Bitcoin is really fucking cool. I think we can all agree that. His reach brings Bitcoin to a completely new audience. And I knew going into this chat I had to troll Russell just a little bit. So as many of you know, he plays for the Chargers. So I got myself a Rams jersey, stuck it under my hoodie and trolled him on stage with it. I thought he might kill me. When he stood over me, I realised how fucking big he is, but luckily he took it in jest, so it was all good fun. And yeah, it was a cool conversation. I do love talking to Russell about Bitcoin. You know, we got into how Russell found Bitcoin, how he negotiated his own NFL contract, and trying to include Bitcoin in it, what it means for him now, and what his plans are after the NFL. So I hope you enjoy this. I definitely think it was worth releasing, so any feedback, give me a shout. Just a couple of notes. I'm out in Portland now, as I said. Tomorrow I'm going to be heading to San Francisco. I'm going to be having a meetup there. Then I'm off to LA for CIS, and then I'm going to be in New York for the Human Rights Foundation's Freedom Forum. I won't be able to make the Lightning Conference in Berlin. It was just too much of a stretch, so I'll be following that online, but good luck to everyone who goes. Also, please do check out my new show, Defiance. That's available at defiance.news. All right, if you've got any questions, hit me up. It's hello@whatbitcoindid.com.
All right, man. Well, we should talk about Bitcoin.
Okay, let's do it.
All right. Come on, Russ. What is Bitcoin?
What is Bitcoin? It's funny, when I explain Bitcoin, or at least when one of my teammates has asked me, because that's usually been where most of my dialogue is, particularly about Bitcoin. They say, man, what is Bitcoin? I said, well, what is freedom, right? What is independence? And I think that one of the reasons that I ask that question and why it resonates so well with my teammates is because I think when you look at the construct, especially with an athlete, what tends to happen is all throughout our careers, I guess, right? Because we've essentially been playing this game since we've been 10 years old into adulthood. There's always been somebody sort of managing our lives and serving as some sort of facilitator and manager, an agent, and some form of advocate. And at the end of the day, what they all do, right, is they have their hand out and they want a piece, right? They say, well, in order for you to do that, or do whatever you're attempting to do, right, the cost, right, of participating is my fee, right? So when I've talked about Bitcoin and I've tried to explain what it is, I said, hey, imagine a world, right, where you have inextricable value associated to yourself, right, and there's no fee. Right? There's complete independence, there's complete sovereignty over how you want to live your life, right? You are exceptional, and you can live that way, right? Not in the same accordance with whatever government or whatever central authority may be over your life. And I think a lot of guys get that. So when somebody asks me, hey, what is Bitcoin? It's, hey man, do you like freedom? Do you like independence? And they're like, yeah, I do. Well, Bitcoin's for you.
And didn't you negotiate your own contract?
I did. Yeah. I did, yeah.
Woo!
Yeah. That was fun. That was fun because it was, it's funny when I decided to represent myself in contract negotiations with the NFL, I didn't realize I'd get so much pushback. Right? And I think the reason I got most of the pushback was because people weren't necessarily used to, I guess, the asset coming to them and saying, no, I speak for myself. I do things in a way which I can prioritize things on my own and decide how I want my future to be. Right? People aren't used to that. They want to put you in this bubble, this box. I feel like I sound like Kanye right now. Doesn't he say that a lot? Right? It's the truth, right? Because I think at times people, right, if you give them the opportunity, especially Big Brother or the man or whatever we want to call them, right, they will try to assign their own values to who you are, right? And I think me deciding to represent myself in free agency was completely contradictory to that.
I think a lot of people have been fascinated since you've kind of arrived in the Bitcoin world.
I hope so.
I think one of the most interesting things as well for me is the fact that you've just gone straight to Bitcoin. You've bypassed all the bullshit, all the shitcoins. You're here, you're pretty much a maximalist, which is really interesting. I think, therefore, it'd be kind of interesting, because I haven't actually heard the origin story for you for Bitcoin. Like, how did you first discover it, and what made it click for you?
Oh, that's such a great question. I would say that there has been a series of events in my life which sort of compounded on one another, right, in order to bring me to this conclusion. I come from a family of immigrants, right? My family's Nigerian, and I remember there are all these occurrences growing up where we spent so much time going to Western Union, right? It's always about taking care of your family overseas. And I even remember just the pain, my mom would have in trying to either have to pay additional fees, and families calling, they need some help, and you're trying to do all these things, right? Because in America, you live in the American dreams. Therefore, your job and your responsibility is to attempt to at least take care of your family in some way. And I think when I look back on those experiences, and I think at the time I didn't really understand them until now, is when you're in a situation where you're needing to pay the piper at all times, right? It's really difficult. And then so I would say that, plus even my journey as a football player and even going into the NFL, I also serve as the vice president of the executive committee of the NFLPA. So I think I get an opportunity to think a lot about labor, right? And what free market capitalism is and how it affects employment. And on our side, we think about wages and working conditions and benefits and all those sort of things, right? And and a lot of times we're constantly having to figure out, okay, well, how do we sort of set the minimum standard for all players, right? What we end up sort of running into is the authority or management or the NFL in this situation is constantly trying to dictate to us, right, how and we manage our money and how money's allotted to us in order to do certain things, right? So when I think about, my childhood experiences, which is this growing up as a African American in tandem with my experiences in the league and the NFL, it kind of brings me to this point where I started asking myself, man, what does sovereignty over my life look like? What does it look like to be in control and to experience freedom in totality?
Do you remember your first Bitcoin purchase? Do you remember the experience?
Yeah, I do. There's one experience in particular, which I think is definitely worth bringing up. So I went to Nigeria maybe like 5-6 months ago or so, and I remember being out there, and it was an incredible experience to go out there and see my family. And and like you're going to any country, you want to take enough cash to sustain you throughout your entire visit. So I probably had too good of a time and spent too much money. And I remember, so I called my bank and was just like, hey, I'm gonna withdraw some money and this for my stay. And mind you, I had already put a note on my account suggesting that I would be in Nigeria, that I would potentially be withdrawing more money. And I'm not gonna say who that bank was, but I remember trying to withdraw some money, and I'm talking to one of the people at customer service, they said, hey, we don't do business with Nigeria. Therefore, we can't send you your money at this time. Right? And I'm just like, well, wait, what do you mean you can't send me my money?
It's my money.
Right, it's my money, right? And I realized at that moment in time, it actually wasn't my money, right? That they were, as a custodian, right, they had ability to allot money on the basis in which they saw fit. And it completely wrecked me because I'd been speculating on Bitcoin for years, and people, I'd hear all sorts of things about why independence and was so valuable, and truly owning your wealth was important. And here I was in a situation where I was facing that head on in a third world country, right, where I didn't have access to any dollars, right? And so imagine, my net worth is it's all over the internet, right? So imagine what I've been able to accumulate over a certain amount of time, right? Me not being able to access that. I mean, I put my body on the line for that, my mind on the line for that, right? And here I am, and I can't even touch my money. Yep. That was completely crazy to me.
Man, okay. Also, before we get into a bit more detail, you've got to tell the story about trying to negotiate your contract to be paid in Bitcoin. Because first, I've got questions about that. I'm like, if you would have negotiated that at Bitcoin at 20 grand, that would have had a problem. But, tell us through your thought process and what actually happened.
Yeah. So, serving as my own agent, right, I get a chance to sit down with the general manager and the money guy. The tweet, that's the tweet right there. Yeah, I get a chance to sit down with those guys, and I don't need directly have any sort of advocate for me who can speak to them on my behalf. So when I remember the contract was already negotiated, and obviously I'm going to the third year of my deal, and I go up to see the general manager. And man, he's probably he's an older white gentleman, a really good guy, and he's probably in his 60s, mid 60s, and I go up to him and I say, hey. I say, hey, I want half of my salary paid to me in Bitcoin. And he had this most stoic look on his face, and he's like a super smart guy. He's been around the team forever. He's probably heard everything, every excuse for a player to come back and renegotiate his contract. And here I was saying, look, I don't want more money, right? Instead, how about you just give me half of my salary in Bitcoin? And he looked at me and was just like, what the fuck is Bitcoin? So here I am trying to explain, hey, it's like digital gold, and it could be an asset and currency, And and there's this thing called this ledger, and he's just like, no.
But you're not the only one, right? Matt Barkley?
Yeah, I know Matt.
He's
Matt's
tried as
guy.
well, hasn't he?
Yeah. I don't think he had any more success than I did.
There is a way you can get your salary half paid in Bitcoin.
Oh, please tell.
Yeah, you need to speak to Alan Lane from Silvergate, who's here.
I think he was harassing me earlier.
He said he can do it for you.
Okay, I'll talk to him.
All right, so let's talk a bit now about the NFL. Obviously, you're a superstar in the NFL.
Thank you.
It's great for Bitcoin that you are a vocal supporter of it, because it helps Bitcoin reach wider communities. Firstly, somebody asked you a great question earlier, but there was only a few of us in the room, so I'm going to ask it again. What's the experience been like talking to your teammates about it? Have you converted any? Are you getting laughed at? What's the kind of general experience with your teammates? Because you're the Bitcoin guy, right?
Well, I mean, it's better than being the pizza guy, but I'll go as the Bitcoin guy. It's been funny, right? Because I think when you're dealing with NFL players, there's so many gatekeepers, right? There's so many managers and agents and financial advisors, right? And people that they rely on for information. And to put on top of that, you have this propaganda that all NFL players will be divorced or bankrupt, at the end of their career. And they say, well, I think the number's been 70-something%, right? So I don't even know if that's really true, right? But,
I've done that, and I'm not even a player.
Well, I mean, as soon as you became a Rams fan, your fate was sealed. Just kidding. So you threw me off there. Why'd you do that?
I was thinking about my divorce.
Well, so there's just all these people, right, that have their hands in players' lives, and here I am presenting this concept, right, which I would say in traditional finance and economics, people are completely averse to, and I'm leading with this question. It's just man, what does it look for you to truly own, right, your wealth, and to have nobody else being in control of that for you, right? And I think it's a compelling narrative, right? It's definitely a compelling narrative because I think to some extent guys want to be in an ownership role, right? And I would say many players are similar to myself. They were raised in sort of the urban plight of America, right? And there are working class to lower middle income African American families, right? So, when they're engaging with this sport, right, they're forsaking their health and their conditions all to generate enough wealth, right, to take care of their family, right? And they want to do it forever and for generations to come. And when I'm presenting this idea of Bitcoin, it's a little bit hard to swallow at first, right? Because they see the volatility and they see how things are moving, but I think little by little you start chipping away. And what I've seen is, there are a lot of players that are similar to myself that weren't necessarily open to discussing it. And man, you just keep going after them. And before you know it, I've had guys come up to me and say, hey man, I bought that Bitcoin. But they never say it in front of everybody else, right? So they want to make me look like the terrible guy, the guy who doesn't know what he's talking about. But they'll take me off to the side and say, hey, yeah, I got some Bitcoin, man. Hey, to the moon, baby, to the moon. I'm like, woo. I'm like, oh, thanks. So it's been fun.
So an interesting thing for me that I learned recently, as somebody grown up in England, and we didn't get much football on the TV. Obviously, we get games every year now, which is amazing in London. But when I grew up, you knew of a few players. It was like Jerry Rice and Steve Young, because the 49ers were big back then. And I found out recently, firstly with the NBA, the average career is less than 3 years, which blew my mind because it never crossed my mind. And then somebody told me in the NFL it's actually shorter. So I'm imagining there's a scenario where people could come in very quickly, suddenly they're earning good money, and then suddenly they're not. Where is the intersection for Bitcoin here in kind of financial education for sports stars?
Yeah, and I think it's important to think about Bitcoin, and I like to say Bitcoin is freedom, right? Because ultimately, freedom is about one's choice and then the ability to exercise those choices. And even precluding to that, right? Like when I think about freedom, I think justice is a prerequisite of freedom, right? So when I'm talking about these backgrounds in which players come from, right, which some would say is extremely oppressive, and they've definitely went their way. The goal for a lot of these players, right, is to make it to the leagues, right? Make it to the big leagues, and unfortunately, you're in a situation where you have 2 to 3 years of your average career, right? We've invested so long, right? So much time and commitment most guys since they've been 10 years old, right? So I think the ideal of Bitcoin in terms of being able to create real wealth for yourself. It resonates and it really sticks to a lot of players, especially when the career span and your earning potential is so short. So I think the way I've heard a lot of people look at it is they look at real estate, they look at stocks and bonds, but if I can get just a little, if I can if people can think about their wealth in sort of their portfolio about 5 to 10%, which is how I initially was thinking about it, I think it's okay.
But is it Andrew Luck you said should put his whole, 29 million in?
I didn't say that. I didn't say it. Andrew's a really smart guy, right? He's one of the most, he's a peculiar person. He still uses a flip phone, so I don't even know how he would even, how he lives in this world.
What is that?
Right. Next time I meet him, I'll probably try to reach out to him and have the conversation about Bitcoin with him.
That's a real issue as well now within the NFL with injuries and people concerned about the effect on them. Are you noticing that players now are having to really consider their whole life? They're not just having to consider, right, if I need to get in the team. They're having to think about the next 10, 20 years. And is there a support infrastructure to help people prepare, for this whole career? Because it's gone from me thinking, oh, this is amazing, you're a superstar, to actually, oh shit, I really don't want to go out and get a bad injury. I really must manage my finances correctly. I've got to negotiate the right contract. This seems like a lot of pressure in this.
Yeah, it is a lot of pressure, right? Because our background isn't necessarily the same as our counterparts and peers, right? We've been working since we've been 10, and then you go throughout college, and in the NCAA, we're working 50, 60 hours a week, right? I don't even see how it's possible for us to get an entire full education right at the time. But we're fortunate enough. We're the NFLPA, which is the union arm of the NFL. We spent a lot of time thinking about post-career benefits and ways to support players. And I've even at the times talked about, man, what would it look like for us to put a certain percentage of money that we get accredited seasons for the amount of years that we play, and it goes towards, annuity plans and et cetera. So I mean, what would it look like to put a certain percentage of that in Bitcoin, right? It has been the best performing asset class in 10 years, right? Like, it makes complete sense. But again, right, like, people more think about the downside, right? So, like, I'm constantly trying to push them to think differently, players to think differently about, hey, where do you want to put your wealth? Where do you want to put, any sort of investment into your future at, I don't give investment advice. So, like, I just want to pose an ideal to them for them to think about, the players to think about.
So college football is something I've discovered recently as something that's actually incredible. I really enjoy college football as well. And one of the things I've noticed is that this is incredible. Like, you've got stadiums with 80, 100,000 people selling out for college games. And you've just said these are people who put in 50, 60 hours in a week, so they might not be getting an education. So in some ways, they're gambling their education for the chance of making the draft, right?
Sure.
Are they compensated outside of their education? And is that something you think they should be? Because if they're filling up a stadium, there must be money in there to support these people. Or is it just a big risk? And if they don't make the draft, then they're essentially on the scrap heap?
Yeah. I think that's a very difficult question. I've definitely been an advocate of the Fair Pay to Play Act that's been pushed out here in California. I think our government in California is really progressive in that way, in seeing players, like, just like anybody else, right, like, have civil liberties, right? Like, I think that's the battle that people have been fighting since, the beginning of America, right? Right, that we foundationally have. Those are basic principles, like, in America. And it's for college players to not be able to make money off their likeness and imaging. Like, I really believe it's un-American, right? And some people make the case and say, well, hey, they're getting an education, right? But I mean, the value of education, especially when they're not really participating fully in school, is insane to me, right? So, look, I think when we talk about sovereignty, when we talk about one's ability to monetize their likeness, I think it's something that we need to take a harder look at, right? Because the institutions, the NCAA, these schools, they're making money hand over foot, right? And, you have all these head coaches making $8-10 million a year, and nobody disputes that they're making too much. Nobody says anything about that because it's the free market. Yet the same standard isn't applied to all of college athletes, and that irks me.
All right, okay. All right, well, listen, obviously this is an amazing event. Turned around in about a month, is it?
Yeah.
Big props to George over there as well.
Yeah, George.
You've managed to bring an amazing group of people here that all want to support the event and help with it. But what's the goal? What's the mission here for you? Like, what's the big idea? Where are you going with this?
Yeah. So I love to talk about that. And, like, one shout out to the team. You guys have, in a month, what you guys have been able to create and put this together, and whether it's on social media, like can we give them a round of applause, please? Like, yeah. Thank you all so much. Thank you all so much for what you're doing. So, I would say, when I think about the grander vision, like, we want to get as many people involved into Bitcoin as possible, right? Because here's the thing: is when I first bought Bitcoin, it took me 2 years of speculation to understand what Bitcoin really was. But when I fully had a grasp of it, right, it was like life altering. And in my head, I was like, man, like, how do we get this to people? And I think when I sort of look at the people in Bitcoin or people in crypto, I think what's lacking, right, is that I don't know if there's any real conviction, right? Like, I think people are fine having the conversations, and debating one another all day, but, like, man, what about the grind and the legwork that you need to do to be in these communities? I got a good friend who's here right now. He's sitting around. He has a church out in Santa Ana, and they talk a lot about social justice and equity for people, right? Like, if anything, I think if the Bitcoiners should be rushing to every single opportunity like they can, right, to show that, Bitcoin, it really will change people's lives, and we're gonna find the least and the most downtrodden people, right, to be able to support, right? And, like, so when I think about what Bitcoin is, right, as a platform, I more think about, man, like, there are real issues that we can solve, right? And then the more people that get into this, the better it is. It's money for the people, right? And I think that people can drive this, right? And I think they can be a force to be reckoned with, right? And I love it. And I when I talk to my team and when we conversate about where this thing's going to head up to, man, we got crazy ambitions. We're going to do a lot of things. We have events coming up throughout the year, which George will talk about more later on. We're really excited about what's coming up on the horizon.
All right, well, look, final question. And firstly, thank you for inviting me here and giving me this opportunity to do this. It's a real pleasure and honor. Just a final thing to close out. Like, you've got a great group of people here. We know they're pretty much all Bitcoiners. What message do you want to leave with people? Like, what do you want them to take from this, and what do you want them to go and do, and what do you want the outcome from this event to be?
Yeah, I would like to say that people need to realize, especially the ones in here, right? Like, you are a representation of Bitcoin, right? So, like, when we talk about what this thing is, it's not just the technical jargon and your ability to regurgitate things you've already heard before, right? But, like, are you relatable, right? Do you care about people, right? Because I think, when you start out with that first, right, and people know, I'm serious about you being able to experience everything you can in this very short life that we have, right? It actually changes the perspective. Like, yeah, for sure. Thank you. Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I literally go out of my way, right, to talk to everybody about this, and like, I leave with the same question, man. Is independence important to you? Is sovereignty important to you? Man, here, I've got something for you, man, like, that you may like, right? And just hear me out, right? I'm not trying to give you any investment advice, any of that. I have something that may actually change your life.
All right, man. Well, listen, amazing. Thank you again. And just a round of applause for Russell.
Thank you.
All right, so how was that? Did you enjoy that? Was it good to hear from Russell? I will be badgering him to get him on the show one day to do a full interview. I've got so many other things I want to ask him. And yeah, what a cool guy. I mean, he's come into Bitcoin, he's putting on the events, he's trying to become part of it, he's trying to expand Bitcoin. I think it's really cool to have someone with his high profile as part of this. And do you know what? It was really interesting hearing him trying to negotiate his own contract to include Bitcoin and educating other football players on Bitcoin and just how much awareness there is or isn't, and what he's doing to try and raise awareness amongst other players. So yeah, very cool. Really appreciate it. Massive thanks, Russ. Thanks for having me at the event. Thanks for inviting me to do the fireside chat. And yeah, look forward to chatting you again in the future. As ever, if you've got any questions about the show, you can email me on hello@whatbitcoindid.com. If you want to support the show, head over to my website, click on the support section. That will explain everything you can do. And also do check out my new show, Defiance, which is at defiance.news.